Good evening. I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. As Arizona's official voter education agency, Clean Elections is proud to sponsor these debates. Our mission is to ensure that you have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions about the issues that impact your life, and head to the polls with confidence. To make sure your voice is heard, please keep these upcoming deadlines in mind. October 5th, voter registration deadline. October 7th, early voting begins, and November 3rd, general election day. If you're watching this debate live, we want to hear from you. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time using one of the following methods. Email debates@kc-a.com, text 480-769-9511, phone 480-937-1253. Thank you for joining us and for staying engaged in our democracy. For more resources to help you prepare for the November 3rd general election, please visit our website at azcleanelections.gov. Enjoy the debate.
Good evening and welcome to the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections debate for Legislative District 29. I'm Nicole Ludden, a reporter with the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be your moderator. Tonight, you'll hear from one of the candidates running for State House and Legislative District 29, Democrat Christine Scianna. You'll also hear from one of the candidates running for State Senate, Democrat Eric Stafford. The two other House candidates, Republican Steve Montenegro and James Taylor, and the other Senate candidate, Republican Janae Shamp, declined to participate in tonight's debate. We'll start with the candidate for the House first, then take a quick break and talk with the Senate candidate. LD29 stretches from the Yavapai County border to the I-10 and Loop 303 interchange and includes Surprise, El Mirage, Whitman, and parts of Glendale, Goodyear, and Peoria. It is a Republican-leaning district. And since we only have one candidate for each race with us tonight, we'll do a Q&A instead of a debate, but we'll follow the same general format. Here's how tonight's Q&A will go. We'll start with a 90-second opening statement, then we'll spend a few minutes getting to know the candidate. We'll dig into the core issues facing this district, then ask the candidates to explain their votes for one of the propositions on November's ballot. We'll do a rapid-fire round, and we'll finish with the 90-second closing statement. Okay, let's get started. Christine, thank you for being here. We'll start with a 90-second opening statement. Tell the voters who you are and why you're running, please.
Okay. I was born and raised in Arizona. My name was Christine Webster, and I lived in North Phoenix and attended school out there from the age of 4 all the way up until I moved out. I attended ASU, received my first bachelor's degree in psychology. I received a post-baccalaureate degree in the early 2000s for education. And then later in 2009, I received my master's degree in science for special education curriculum. I became involved in advocating around 2019 with parents of children with autism and speaking on bills at both the House in 2019 and the Senate in 2022. All of those bills passed except for the one that would have raised caregiver pay. Ducey vetoed that, so that did not go through. But we were able to make sure that the disabled community and those in places like were affected by Hacienda, because it was Hacienda that brought it about. If anybody knows the story, it has to do with a woman who had been taken advantage of when she was in a vegetative state. So we were looking to monitor group homes, raise caregiver pay, and take care of those who are vulnerable adults. And after that, in 2025, we had an experience with Livingston from the House talking about cutting Medicaid starting in January. That brought the whole disabled community out there. We attended sessions, and we were at the point of a bipartisan bill being passed. And about 10 minutes before that bipartisan bill was to be voted on, the Speaker of the House, whom is one of the candidates I'm running against, put 3 Republicans on to vote down that bill. And then as of July, when the big beautiful bill passed and the disabled community was still fighting for their rights to be able to be parent caregivers for their disabled children, I decided to step up and run because I feel like our representatives should represent the people, and many people who had written to both the speaker and the other candidate did not receive replies and did not receive answers. So I feel like we should be there representing the people, and I believe I'm that candidate that can do that for LD29.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our first round of questions, but first, a quick reminder for viewers. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time. Email debates@kc-a.com, text 480-769-9511, or call 480-937-1253. Okay, this first segment is about who you are, not your policy positions, but what shaped you, how you think, and who you'd be if elected to office. Try to keep your answers under 90 seconds. First up, outside of raising your family, what's something you've built, started, or led that you're proud of, and what did it teach you?
I believe that I led for advocating. I reached out and helped families that were dealing with DCS issues. Our community, autism is really, really misunderstood, and behaviors for children are often blamed on the parents of not being able to control them. I went through a similar experience in 2018, and after that became an advocate for other families. The Autism Society of Greater Phoenix was able to get me in touch with other parents who were in the same situation. I also reached out to parents through our Arizona Autism Moms who were running into some of the same situations. There was a lot of fear around going to Phoenix Children's Hospital because there are rumors that they were getting paid to make calls to DCS on parents, and if they disagreed with any kind of care that went against the doctors, that they automatically at DCS called on them. So I helped advocate. I felt like I built a network, and I believe I helped several families, and even with my experience and getting them in touch with the disability lawyer or other lawyers, the lawyer that had represented us. And I think my fight to try to make things better for the disabled community by talking, on bills also helped as well.
Okay, thank you. When you signed up to vote for the first time and had to pick your party, how did you make that decision of what party to register under?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I kind of went against my family. Believe it or not, we had a checklist, and I was 17. It was December of 1989. And I actually had more on the Republican side. So I was a Republican for 25 years before Trump came along. When Trump came along, I had always kind of been on the fence, and I had never really voted for a Republican for president. Although I liked McCain and had voted for him as a senator, I didn't vote for him as president. I had always voted for Democrats and felt like my belief system leaned more towards the Democrats. But because Arizona tends to be a state that believes in, guns, I wasn't totally against guns. So many Democrats you'll find out here, carry guns, but they believe in gun safety and common sense gun laws. So, but yeah, ironically, I had been a Republican at one time, and I switched over in 2015 and became a Democrat.
Okay. And if you weren't running in this race, what would you be looking for in a candidate to get your vote?
I'd be looking for somebody that'd be listening to us, that would respond when you contact them, would listen to our complaints, would treat with respect. Because of the experience last year, sitting in the House, I hadn't had that experience in 2019 when I'd been in the House. They were very understanding. It was different people involved in a committee. And this time around, I was shocked at how we were treated. I'm shocked that most people have not even met Montenegro or James Taylor, and they don't have town halls, they don't knock on doors. I feel like you need somebody that is going to listen to the voters. And there's a lot in our LD that is happening. And I know a lot feel that way. Everything from BSNF, the rail yard that they're putting in Whitman. We have the detention center, we have the data center, and a lot of people have come out. I've been at City Hall, and we want people to represent us that are going to listen, that there's going to be transparency, there's going to be accountability, and not sneaking around and not putting it past the people. The people should be able to vote on this stuff. They should know what's going on. And if I wasn't running, I would want somebody that listened to my concerns and consider my concerns instead of voting with their party.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move into the core of tonight's debate now. These are the issues voters told us matter most in this district. I'll ask a question. Please keep your responses to about 90 seconds. You just mentioned data centers, so this is a good segue. Data centers are becoming one of the most contentious development issues in Arizona. Where do you stand on their continued growth, and how should the state balance their economic benefits with opposition from communities that don't want them nearby?
I think both parties kind of agree that they're concerned about these data centers that's happening in multiple states, at least for the voters. I don't believe that's the case for our representatives, because I know Montenegro wanted to give $100 million tax credit to the data centers, so he's for them. But I'm concerned that the fact of the impact on water, the impact on the environment, the noise that it's going to cause, we haven't looked at overall what kind of damage it could do. And it would make sense to have a data center out somewhere where it's not in the middle of a neighborhood, like the one that's being proposed in Surprise. That one would be literally in people's backyards. Their backyards would be up against it. And so I believe that with data centers, we need to look more at the environmental effects and what it does to houses around it, because from some of the studies that have already been done in some of the other states, it's affected water. I've seen water come out brown, and it's affected home values. Being around a data center, people don't necessarily want to live near a data center. So I think proximity to residential areas is a huge factor that we need to consider and look at. I'm not completely against them, but we do need to look at what kind of environmental factors and factors to the neighborhoods that it's going to impact. And I feel like a lot of people are frustrated because they didn't know. All of a sudden the land's bought and the data centers are being put in and they had no input. I think voters are at this point, they want input. They want their voices heard. And if they have concerns and they're being ignored, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Do you think that sort of regulation is something the state should regulate, or should that be left up to local cities and counties?
Yeah, I think the legislature should regulate it. I know we have a pause right now for the next 3 years. They are looking into it. I appreciate that Hobbs did that. But yeah, we need to look at the overall effects of what these centers will have on communities, because our community. I've been here over 20 years and we've grown quite a bit. And to me, it's shocking that they would put it in the middle of a residential area. And I think also at some scientists have brought up the fact that at one time, computers took up like entire buildings. And now we have a computer we hold in our hands. So are these big, huge places that are taking up all this space? Are we eventually going to get to the point where we have something that could fit into a smaller area? I mean, are we using the land effectively? And I think we need to look at everything.
Okay, thank you. What do you see as the biggest affordability issue facing families in your district, and what specific policies would you push for at the legislature to make my life more affordable?
Rent has gone up significantly. I believe it's tripled since 2016. I know it's gone up significantly. And just to have an apartment is around $2,000. It's making it almost impossible for young people and single parents to be able to afford to live. And they have looked into and considered affordable housing. In Surprise, I do know some areas were not happy with the idea that it could be near their area because they see it as lower income housing. So there's concerns from residents that it'll bring down their values and they're asking them to be put in a different place. We need to look at all factors, though. I mean, there is going to be some pushback, but at the same time, we do need to look at alternatives because the housing market's out of control, and people can't afford that. Even at this point, gas prices have gone up. We have no control over the fact that there's a war that is part of the reason, that are raising these prices. But price gouging is happening in grocery stores. I see it on Amazon. One day it's this price, and then it's higher a couple days later, depending on what day you buy it, and then it drops again. So prices going up and down based on what you buy. They're watching you. You have your card, you use your card to get your rewards, but they're watching what you buy, and you may get a different price than somebody else. And they have areas like rural areas that have these dollar stores that they'll go in and buy something and it'll say on the shelf $6.98, but when they check out, it's actually $10.98. So there is price gouging going on that is affecting people. And I know the AG is trying to effectively sue, regarding those issues. But I think as a legislature, I think we can create legislation that could protect people from this price gouging as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's round this section off the education question. Arizona's universal ESA program has grown dramatically since lawmakers opened it to every student. What, if anything, would you change about the program, and how should lawmakers account for its future costs when they're writing the state budget?
The ESA vouchers.
School vouchers. Yeah.
Yeah, I know some of the people in the disabled community don't like to call them vouchers because they say vouchers are illegal, but that's what they basically have become. The ESA program started in 2011. It was for the disabled community and lower economic areas. That makes sense. My daughter actually qualified for an ESA voucher. We did not end up using it, but she qualified. I saw nothing wrong with that. But when Ducey opened it up to everyone in 2022, I believe Save Our Schools said more than 60% of the people that started taking advantage of those ESA vouchers were only in public or private schools. They had never been in public schools. And so I see ESA as taking away from public education. I see schools closing down. I've seen it in Peoria where they're closing down. And it's really sad that we have defunded public schools so much. It's been 60 years since the House has been run by Democrats. And I'm, in my 50s. So my whole life, it's been run by Republicans. Education's never been funded. And when I became a teacher, I didn't go into it for the money. We used to always say, we're not in it for the money, but you have to survive. At one point when I was a single parent, I had to go to a food bank because my pay with 3 degrees was not enough to be able to care for my children and live. I just couldn't do it. And that's sad when you have teachers they're not making a livable salary. So with the ESA, there needs to be some reining in. I'm not completely against the ESA program, but I do not think it should be used for private schooling for just ordinary people. I think the idea of having $150,000 cap that they tried to pass that proposition, now the courts have taken away the voters' chance to vote on it. ESA was voted down by over 60% of voters originally. They did not want the program. So voters aren't being heard. And that's the problem. We should be putting more bills out there for voters to be able to vote on, not, the House or the Senate deciding this is what it should be. Voters should have a choice to vote on it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our next segment. I'll ask you how you plan to vote on one of the propositions that will be on Arizona's general election ballot this year. After I give a short summary, you'll have 1 minute to tell voters how you would vote and why. So let's talk about Proposition 318. In summary, the measure would require school sports teams to be designated as boys, girls, or co-ed based on athletes' biological sex assigned at birth. It would also bar athletes from using locker rooms, restrooms, and other private athletic spaces designated for the opposite sex. How will you vote on this measure and why?
I would vote no, because I don't believe in discrimination of any sort. I think the fact that that bill's being put out there, they're fearing things that really don't matter. In my opinion, I've heard both sides. I have friends who are Republicans who share concerns. The bathroom issue was a big deal for a while, but there's plenty of places. You go up to Sedona, you have co-ed bathrooms, and it's not an issue. And I think with kids, I think it's wrong to discriminate against anyone, and I would not vote yes for that. I would vote no.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more round before we move on to closing statements. These are short answer questions, about 15 seconds each. You can add a short reason if you want, but try to keep it tight. Okay, first up, if you had to narrow it down to one word, what's the most overlooked problem in LD29?
I think the rail yard, there's not a lot heard about it. There's a lot about the detention center. There is about the project Baccarat, if I'm saying that correctly, the data center. So the data center, detention center have gotten a lot of press and people speaking about it, but I don't feel like the rail yard has. I'm being told it's going to be like 1,000 feet from a school. Why would it be that close to a school? It's over 4,000 square feet that is going to be taken up, and it's a huge swath of land. It's going to affect traffic, which is already an issue on the 60. They're worried about all the trucks going by. I've heard recently that they have, even though it hasn't been approved yet by Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, but they're already leveling, and because they got an air quality permit, but they're not following much of that. I'm hearing from residents that their stuff is coated with dust, and a lot of them have land out there. They moved out to Whitman so that they could have land. There was $500,000 homes out there, and the fact that that's now being built there, the prices of homes are going down. People are very frustrated about that, and the fact that they reach out to the rail place and nobody's responding. They didn't. The last meeting, I had another meeting I had to go to, so I sent somebody to go to that meeting, and they never showed. So there's not enough. We need more transparency. We need more accountability. They snuck in and bought that land, and residents there were not given any notice, weren't told. And so, and there's plenty of conservatives out there that are not happy about what's happening. I've listened to them, and one in particular has told me that she has allergies, she has problems breathing, and all this dust is coming in, and they're supposed to be spraying it down with water, and they're not doing it. So there's concern that there's no accountability in what they're doing out there right now, and they haven't even been given permission to do it yet. So
yeah, I'm gonna this one might be more easy to answer. What's the best restaurant in your district?
Which what now?
What's the best restaurant in your district?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Cooper's Hawk. I really like, they have very good food there. They have wine tastings there. I've taken a lot of friends there, and they have specials and deals. And if you're a member, you can get like, $25 things back. You can get things for your birthday. It's overall the vibe there is really nice. I really enjoy Cooper's Hawk. It is a very nice restaurant.
All righty. And last question, if you didn't have this debate tonight, what would you be doing?
I'm a caregiver for my daughter. I would be, right now my significant other is out with with my daughter so that I can do this because she needs 24/7 care. We do a lot of stuff together, and we would be probably working on HAB goals right now because it's close to dinner time and she can make her own meals as long as she's being watched. Otherwise, we've had things not have water in them and get burned in the microwave. But as long as she's being watched, But yeah, and that's why I'm so for the parent program and keeping that for parents, is because I never had that opportunity when my daughter was under 18. And since I've cared for her, she's had no hospitalizations. And I feel like the parent paid program has gotten some negative press lately, and a lot is misunderstood. They are saving a lot of money. If you look at the data, they are saving a lot of money from not being in hospitals, not getting those hospitalizations. It actually saves money to Medicaid. So I think more needs to be looked at for that. But yeah, I enjoy spending time with my daughter in the evenings and doing her habilitation.
Okay. And that means we've reached closing statement. So please take 90 seconds whenever you're ready to give your closing statement.
Okay. I started running. I'm not a politician, obviously. My background is education. I used to be a science teacher. I'm a big believer in believing in science, and I'm very frustrated with the fact that in the last 10 years, science has been ignored, and it's really being ignored right now. We're having problems with food recalls left and right. We're having measles outbreaks because people aren't vaccinating. And I think at this point, we need to look at and pay attention to the science, because there's all kinds of things that we could do. There's regenerative farming that would help with cut down on pesticides, would cut down on our dust storms, because industrialized farming causes a lot of topsoil to be lost during storms. And regenerative farming has been shown in other countries to even return from desertification, like areas that had turned into deserts being brought back into ecosystems. I believe that my background with science and education and advocacy and being down at the Capitol, knowing how everything works, I think I would be the best candidate because I care. I would listen to people. I would continue to do town halls. We've done a few. I go to all the meetings. We're lucky to have the retirement community, Pebble Creek, Sun City Grand. We've had amazing support. Eric, I don't know how I would do this. We're a slate. We work together. He's amazing. We need more young people getting into politics. I encourage people to come down to the Capitol. I encourage people to listen. If you can't go, watch it on video. Be involved. People need to be more involved. And our community has really come together because of the detention center. And I think if you vote for me, you'll have somebody that will listen to you and consider, regardless, I will reach across the aisle. No matter what it takes, I will do what I can to work for the people, because it's supposed to be we the people, not political party. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. That concludes tonight's Q&A with Christine Scianna, a candidate for State House in LD29. Thank you to our candidate for being here, and to our voters, thank you for tuning in and informing yourselves ahead of the November 3rd election. For official voter information, you can visit azcleanelections.gov. The debate for this district's Senate seat will begin shortly, so stay with us through this quick break.
Thank you.
Good evening, and welcome back to the Arizona Clean Elections debate for Legislative District 29. I'm Nicole Ludden, a reporter at the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be your moderator. Tonight, you'll hear from one of the candidates competing for the district Senate seat, Democrat Eric Stafford. The other candidate in this race, Republican Janae Shamp, declined to attend tonight's debate. As a reminder, LD29 stretches from the Yavapai County border to the I-10 and Loop 303 interchange and includes Surprise, El Mirage, Whitman, and parts of Glendale, Goodyear, and Peoria. It is a Republican-leaning district. And since we only have one of the candidates with us tonight, this portion will be a Q&A instead of a debate, but we'll follow the same general format. Okay, let's get started. Eric, thank you for being here. We'll start with a 90-second opening statement. Please tell the voters who you are and why you're running.
Thank you for having me. I'm Eric Stafford, your local state Senate candidate running in Legislative District 29. I'm a Goodyear native. I studied aviation maintenance in high school and machining. And I loved working with my hands, so I really enjoyed that. But I decided that I wanted to help people in a different way. And so I jumped into the medical field as a veterinary technician. And now I'm studying to be a medical assistant. So I identify as a patriot, and I'm running for office because I care about people in this district. And I see too many people with full-time jobs struggling to get by, graduates fresh out of college who aren't able to get jobs in the field that they studied for. And all the while, the stock market is soaring, and politicians feels like they're failing to get anything done to help actually make life easier. Nowadays, the American dream kind of feels only like a dream, and the middle-class people, it feels like we don't have any hope for home ownership, let alone kids, vacations, or having the time for healthy home-cooked meals. Our elected officials are supposed to represent us and protect us from issues like water shortages, flock cameras at every corner, access to health care, and our housing being turned into forever rentals. And while all of these issues are going on for everyday Arizonans, our elected officials are taking dark money from special interest groups and PACs and not really working on behalf of the people who elected them. So I'm a young person who is sick and tired of seeing this and feeling hopeless about my future and want to see in America that we don't have to. I hate that we have to constantly spend money for everything in life, and there's not a lot of like cheap ways to just enjoy ourselves in this day and age, and want to help build up this future for myself and for others who are just trying to live a good life and do things in our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our first round of questions, but first, a quick reminder for viewers. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com. You can text 480-769-9511 or call 480-937-1253. Okay, let's get started with some get to know you questions. Please take about 60 to 90 seconds to answer. First up, take us back to the specific moment you decided to run. Where were you? What was happening around you? And what pushed you over the edge?
Yeah, so I think it was a lot of things, but I think my first foray into politics was canvassing for a local candidate. I think it was Lauren Kuby was running for Corporation Commission at the time. And I was terrified. I was very uncomfortable. I worked with my hands. I did machining and all that. I didn't have to like go out and talk to people and do customer service. So it was very unfamiliar. I worked forward into working for different voting rights groups and then working for a candidate senatorial campaign during 2022. And so all helped me to build up my voice. And it wasn't until I was in my first legislative district meeting in my district and went in, I was the only young person. And there was a woman who came in who was like mid-30s, tall, confident, and came up to me and was like, we chatted a little bit and was like, have you ever considered running for office? I, at that time, was like, hell no, that sounds like a nightmare. And eventually, just through persistence, I got convinced to run for office. And from there, it's been just a crazy whirlwind. My first cycle, the first 2 years of running before this were terrifying. I was not this kind of extrovert who was ready for this. And I'm just so happy and grateful that like my community kind of embraced me and helped to uplift me and make it so that things like this debate feel like nothing compared to like when I was talking in front of 5 people. I was shaking in my boots. So I'm really happy that now I can feel like a good advocate and like I actually am able to encompass what our district needs for the future moving forward.
Okay, thank you. If you weren't running in this race, what would you be looking for in a candidate to get your vote?
Ooh, I think what should be like a minimum requirement for all politicians is integrity. Like, we need people who are morally good people because we're seeing a lot of politics where people go in and they're just trying to enrich themselves. So I think having good character, having integrity, and it's hard to prove these things when you're meeting someone and talking to someone, but I think another thing that should be mandatory is not taking dark money, PAC money. We don't need people who are elected by you, the voter. We should be beholden to you, the voter, not to corporations who pay us money. It's like, who are we bought and paid for, if not the people that we're supposed to be elected? I put this above the screen because it's by the people for the people. And it's in the Constitution, and it really does just feel like we've lost touch with that. And now we consider money a form of speech, when in fact it's just as simple as consent of the governed. And when we want someone elected, we elect them. And I'm hoping that I can earn people's vote this time for those reasons.
Okay. And describe a time in the last 2 years when you changed your mind about something political and what changed it.
I think in between running last time and this time, after the last cycle, it stressed me out so much. It was hard on all of my relationships. It was a huge commitment. And so I decided I'm not going to run for office again. And so I was pretty firm on that. I still went to local meetings and talked to people, but I had a couple of people who were persistent and they're like, there's nobody running again. If you don't do this, there's going to be no option. It's going to be one candidate and done. And so over time and persistence and realizing that we do need someone with a strong voice and who's going to step up to the plate and do something, that I was convinced to run again and kind of change my mind on that. But another thing that I've struggled with in the past and that I'm happy to have overcome now is I wanted to be this safe candidate. And I was so afraid of saying how I truly felt because I wanted to be someone that was appealable to everybody. And what I'm learning from that is I should not be afraid to speak up for what I think is right and for doing things that are in the best interest of everybody, regardless of what is politically correct or what is popular in the moment. Because at the end of the day, everyone is just trying to get by and be comfortable. And politics is not as complicated as people make it out to be. We just need to do policy that makes sense and is intuitive for everyone's future.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to some more specific policy questions. First up, let's talk about water.
Hmm.
Arizona continues to face questions about its long-term water supply as the state grows. What should the legislature do to ensure there's enough water for existing residents and future development?
I think the last major water bill that was passed in Arizona, I think was like in the 1980s. So we definitely need to reevaluate the way that we are consuming our water. One issue that we're not seeing at a statewide level is there are certain water districts, like in the center of Maricopa County and in other populated areas where the water is being regulated. But there are large swaths of open land out there where a private company, like the popular Saudi Arabia company is a good example, but you can plop down a well in the middle of nowhere and you can just pump as much water as you want, unregulated. And it just seems like in a desert where we are completely running out of water, we have so many farms that aren't using sustainable agricultural practices, pumping unlimited water, and there's not a lot of rules in place to make sure that it's being done responsibly. I think another thing that we're not seeing is you flush the toilet, and this water goes into a gray water category. So this gray water is more than capable of being purified back to the quality of all the rest of the water on the planet that's drinkable. But instead, we're then putting it into this gray water category. We're using it to endlessly water lawns. We're using it to do other secondary things. And it just seems like if we live in a place where we're literally going to run out of water and not going to be able to live here anymore, we should be treating this like Dune. Like the water should, every drop needs to be recirculated, retreated, and even stuff as simple at a municipal level of like, we have a huge park right next door. We shouldn't be watering this stuff in the middle of the day. There are already established sciences that like watering at night is better, or even just cutting back on the amount of things like golf course licenses when we're compromising between a pleasure activity and being able to live in the place that we're born and raised. I think we have to prioritize the people who live here first. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. What do you think the legislature should do to increase funding and resources for Arizona public schools? And please be specific.
Yeah. So it's really hard in Arizona to raise taxes. It's borderline impossible on purpose. And so it only takes a slim minority to be able to lower taxes, but to actually increase funding. Some of the stuff we could do is like medical weed is very popular in the state. Increasing access to licenses for local businesses and for rural communities would not only help these places to gain access to products like this, but then be able to contribute more to the tax base by paying for these goods that are taxed and put into the system. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of, and that I'm sure people have heard a ton about, is the ESA school voucher program. This is not a program that did anything to raise taxes, but what it's doing is funneling $1.1 billion away from our public schools, which 90% of kids use our public school system, 90% of families. And so $1.1 billion is being just completely taken away from an area where a majority of kids are at. And there's just doesn't seem like there is a lot of safeguards in place to treat this more responsibly. Some of these ESA schools are not being audited. Their money can be spent in whichever way they like. And some of the other issues we're seeing there is these are not regular. The teachers who teach at these schools, they're not mandated to have fingerprint clearance cards or background checks. They can be anybody off the street. So there's just a lot of issues when it comes to the current writing of this stuff that is just dangerous for kids and irresponsible. And people have seen all these different stories about like the money that's being misspent on Legos, piano lessons, lingerie, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, that stuff has been addressed, but there are still a million other problems that we have to deal with. And I hope that we do when we get elected.
Okay. Thank you for being specific. Last policy question for you here. A federal immigration detention facility has been proposed in Surprise near Dysart High School. Should the state have any role in where federal detention facilities are located, and what should that process look like in your view?
The difficulty with this topic is a lot of the immigration issues are a federal thing. So I don't know how much that we can do at the local legislative level, but from like a morality standpoint, I want to make sure these things, like in Surprise, it's being built right next to a high school. There's no consideration for public safety. There's no consideration for how are these people who are being detained being treated while in these facilities? Because we have a track record in Arizona of all of these facilities being dangerous. These people aren't just being deported back to their home country immediately. They are sick. They're getting infested with parasites. They're not having access to clean, safe drinking water and food. It's worse than prison, and it's just completely being swept under the rug for some weird reason. And so I'm really just worried about the people that are being detained there being safe and the community actually wanting and consenting to these things before they just plop it down in the middle of a community without thinking of like what the long-term effects are going to be. It just feels very ham-handed and not really thought through.
Okay, thank you so much. For this next segment, I'll ask how you plan to vote on one of the propositions that will be on Arizona's general election ballot. After I give a short summary, you'll have 1 minute to tell voters how you would vote and why. So let's talk about Prop 316. In summary, this measure would let cities and towns keep taxing groceries, but it would limit how much they can raise those taxes and would require voter approval for some increases. Communities that don't already tax groceries would also need voter approval to start doing so. How would you vote on this measure and why?
I I think it's difficult because I want to say, like, obviously increasing taxes anyway is not, it's regressive. It's not really popular with a lot of people. And especially when it comes to groceries, it's such a simple baseline product that everybody needs to survive. So I want to lean that I would probably vote, I think in favor of it. I'd need to read the full content of the bill, but obviously our cities need to build up revenue somehow. We have to fund different public services that are useful to literally everyone that lives in the district. But I do like the idea that there is a little bit of us having to give permission for them to raise our taxes at the local level like that. So yeah, I think I could lean in support of that.
Okay, fair enough. We have time for one more round before we move on to closing statements. These are going to be short answer questions. You can add a short reason if you want, but keep it tight.
Okay.
Question one, what's one state agency you think is in need of the most reform? If you had to pick one.
Reform. I think one that I see that I think has a lot of issues is with it's kind of a federal agency too, but access and just our public healthcare system. We see a lot of greed and corruption when it comes to that. My mom's a great example. She needs a medication to survive. And I think her pills come out to like $2,000 a month through insurance. And if you go to Canada or to Mexico, you can get this for $100. So I wish that we could negotiate drug prices a little better, having a background in veterinary medicine as well. When you go to the vet, you get an itemized thing with the cost of everything. But in America, we see this issue of everything being negotiated, the prices being artificially raised, and it kind of feeling like our healthcare, our livelihood, and our ability to survive in this country is limited by the people who want to make the profits instead of by like the good, hardworking healthcare professionals or just what's right and wrong. So I think that is a huge area that could be improved upon.
Okay, state Medicaid system. Um, this is an easier question. Maybe not actually. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
In this day and age, there's a lot of controversy about like rewriting the Constitution and all sorts of like issues like that. I would love to speak with the founding fathers. Just get a little bit of clarification on a couple things. Obviously, it was already it's pretty well written. So their intentions were there, but might be fun.
Yeah, okay. And what's one business in your district you'd take an out-of-town visitor to?
Ooh, I think there's one right down the street from me that's new. It's called Spitz. I love Mediterranean food, but just anything local, especially in like the Phoenix area or next door in Avondale, we have a lot of like local cultural foods that you can't really get in a lot of other rural communities. So I love going around getting Ethiopian food or getting like El Salvadorian food. It's just a great time.
Okay, gotcha. And that means we've reached closing statements. So please take 90 seconds whenever you're ready.
Yeah. I'm asking for your vote today because we need change. And we need people who are actually willing to stand up and say something about all the terrible things going on in our country. It's not crazy to say that things are bad. It's not crazy to say that things are feeling hopeless for a lot of people. And as the old saying goes, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. The candidate that I'm running against literally has sham in her name. She's an insurrectionist, far-right extremist, the number one anti-vaxxer in the state while we're having a measles outbreak. These candidates bought and paid for by special interest groups. It's all publicly available information. And the person I'm running against has the worst attendance out of anyone in the Senate. Shoot, she can't even make it to our debate. So unlike our opponents, we are actually knocking on doors. We're hammering the street signs down. Every one of those is placed by me or Christine or our friends, and doing it all without being paid a penny because we care. Our current representatives can't even be bothered to talk to their constituents while they're in office. So it's a huge issue. I'm asking for your vote because something needs to change in this district, in this state, in this country. And I don't just want to make a better future for the people who come after. We need to focus on the people who are here now. So I'm Eric Stafford, your next state senator. And thank you for putting me on the ballot. And I hope that I've earned your vote this November 3rd. Thank you. And thank you to Clean Elections. You guys rock.
Okay, thank you so much. That concludes tonight's Q&A with Eric Stafford, a candidate for State Senate in LD29. Thank you to our candidate for being here and to our voters. Thank you for tuning in and informing yourselves ahead of the November 3rd election. For official voter information, visit azcleanelections.gov.